We're talking about the different types of alcohol. There's three basic types of alcohol that you see a lot. Actually, there's lots and lots of different types of alcohol. But the kind of alcohol that you drink is known as ethanol or ethyl alcohol. Methyl alcohol is poison. It's wood alcohol, it's rubbing alcohol. And then isopropanol or isopropyl alcohol is the type of alcohol you use in medicine. So those are the three basic types of alcohols. Drinking alcohol, ethyl alcohol comes in three different forms. Beer, wine, and distilled spirits. The name of it has to do with how it's actually created. Beer is produced when grain ferments when you ferment grain. Usually it's barley, but sometimes they use wheat, as in, I can't think of, Blue Moon, I guess, is made out of wheat. Wine is produced when you ferment fruits like grapes or plums or peaches. You ferment them and then you let them sit for a while and then it creates wine. Distilled spirits have to do with, I'm sorry?
So you make it in June. A big garbage bag, put a little sugar, and you put fruit in them, you know?
Okay.
And you seal it up, and you poke a little holes in there, put a little water in there.
Okay.
Takes about maybe 3 days, 4 days.
Okay. That's wine.
It's Pruno.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that the way you used to do it in
It's
the
pretty
military?
freaking strong. No, this is jail. Why? We got class 6 everywhere.
Distilled spirits are the third type of alcohol. It's made from fermented grains, tubers, fruit, or vegetables, or any other plant. A good example of fermented grains would be whiskey.
Yay.
Yeah, there we go. It's 40 to 50% alcohol. Vodka is made out of potatoes or tubers. Sweet potatoes sometimes, not very often. Usually it's potatoes.
Do you know how to make your own?
What? Vodka?
Mm-hmm.
No,
No.
no, I don't drink, so.
I know, but like, there's people that I know how to make it, and I was just interested in like the process of it.
Ah, the process, okay. Well, anyway, 75% alcohol, pretty strong stuff. Fruits, schnapps and palinka. Palinka is, of course, a Hungarian drink, pretty strong. It's 40 to 50% alcohol. Vegetables, other plants, absinthe, tequila, mezcal. Rum is made out of sugar. Mezcal is made out of the mezcal agave plant, as is tequila. Tequila is not made out of mezcal, it's made out of the agave plant. The mezcal is made out of the mezcal plant. Absinthe is made out of wormwood, and it's poison. It can be made from other fermented beverages. You can distill spirits out of wine. That's what sherry is. Sherry is distilled wine. They just heat the wine and then they distill it, and that's what the sherry is. As weird as that is. And of course, there's the three different types: beer, wine, and distilled spirits. A glass of wine, about 5 ounces of wine equals 1 can of beer, which equals about 1.5 ounces of distilled spirits. So as you can see, one drink is a can of beer, is a glass of wine, or it's a shot. Well, it's a highball glass full of alcohol, well, with alcohol in it, about 1.5 ounces. Shot of alcohol is 1/2 ounce, I think. Maybe not, I don't know. My son knows this stuff. He used to be a bartender. The first indication of beer consumption comes from 10,000 years ago. Beer is made from grains, usually barley, but sometimes wheat, which have been allowed to sprout and then crushed and fermented with hops and yeast. And that's how they make it. Ale is about 5 to 6% alcohol. Stout, Guinness, is another type. So there's ale, stouts, porters, malt liquor, lager, and bock. These are all the different types of beers. If you're a beer drinker, and some people are connoisseurs of beer, I had a friend that never got drunk, but he was a connoisseur of beer. And so he would go around the country going to these little microbreweries and sample their beer. And sometimes it was bock and sometimes it was lager. And he had all this stuff written down, and he was going to write this fabulous book. Lives in St. Louis right now. He has a new girlfriend, so I'm thinking that probably isn't going to, his book isn't ever going to happen. Because, yeah, now she kind of controls him. Anyway, these are the different types: ale, stout, porter, malt liquor, and lager, and bock. This isn't really very important to people that don't drink beer, or who just drink Coors or just drink Budweiser. But the reality is, if you go to different parts of the country, they specialize in different types of beer. If you go to a German town like Cincinnati or Milwaukee, you'll run into a lot of different types of beer because they're Germans and they make their beer in different ways. So if you go east, like to Boston or Philadelphia, you're going to run into a lot of Bock beer. Shaneling beer, of course, is Hunipole is out of Cincinnati. Shaneling is out of New York, Boston area. And then, of course, Michelob Amber Bock is out of Milwaukee. Most of the beer in the United States, of course, is lager beer. Coors, Miller, and Budweiser are all lager beers. As you can see, they're not very strong beers. It's 3.2% to 5% beer or alcohol. So it's not really very strong.
It used to be lower, they just changed it like as they,
To 3.2?
yeah, it
Yeah.
used to be like low.
Well,
like,
see, Mormons aren't supposed to drink at all.
oh, they got their choice, they're adults, they're big people. Don't look out for the rest of us, you know?
They're not supposed to.
I mean, I quit drinking, but when I did, it was like, what's the fuck? I just went through the six pack, nothing's happening. Pissed off, man. I go spend more money.
The malt liquors, Colt 45, Mickey's Malt Liquor, Old English 800, it's 6 to 9%. And then the rest of them are mostly European beers. These are the three that you.
What about Japanese beer? Asahi.
Sake is wine.
No, Asahi. Asahi. Not sake, I know sake is.
Yeah.
That stuff.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how strong their beer is. Really kind of interesting though, in Japan, you can buy beer on the corner. So they have,
So
just
they
like,
have like vending machines?
they do, they
too?
have vending machines. Just like we have Coke machines here, they have beer vending machines.
And wine with vending machines.
Well, you would think that all the kids would be drunk as skunks because all they need is, 100 yen and they get to buy a beer. But they don't. They just don't do it because, it's a collectivist country. But there's vending machines all over the place, just everywhere, as weird as that is. And the Japanese don't drink that much. So why in the world are there all these vending machines around?
Tourists?
And I'm not,
The sumo wrestlers do. I like see what they did every day. They probably drink like,
yeah, put on weight. Yeah.
they probably choke down about 18 beers a day.
Yeah, well, they need to gain weight, so.
But their diet is like healthy as hell.
No, it's not.
No, the soup that they eat, is it, if you look at it,
They have
lot
a
of
really-
fish, vegetables in there.
They have a lot of problems after they stop being wrestlers, losing weight and becoming healthy again. A lot of them just die of heart attacks.
Well, yeah.
In their 40s and-
500 plus pounds.
In their 40s and 50s. So it's not one of those things that you want to do if you want to live a long life.
Yeah.
Wine is a fermented beverage from fruit or grain. Most people think of wine as coming from grapes, but it can also be processed from rice, peaches, and plums. Of course, that's what sake is. It's rice wine.
Rice wine?
Rice wine. American wines tend to be stronger than European wines, strangely enough, and,
Is soju the same thing?
oh, soju?
Hmm.
Soju is, nobody knows how, soju is however strong, however long they fermented it. I
don't
know,
know.
soju is bad stuff,
I've taken like 2 shots and I was like, I can't get up right now.
yeah.
It's like seriously, like, they're like, I don't know what they do, but it's strong as hell.
It can be, or
At
it can
least
be,
what I had.
it can be as weak as you can imagine. It's really kind of weird. They had, because it's not regulated, so, you know, you get a glass of soju.
But
and-
is it made out of fruit?
Yeah,
Not rice, it's fruit.
no, it's fruit. It's whatever, and it can be anything. Soju
That's
just
a
means,
gumbo of alcohol?
well, it can, yeah. It's whatever was left over, the potato peels and whatever. The Koreans are really funny about this stuff. American wines tend to be stronger than European wines. American wines have between 12 to 14% alcohol. European wines, 8 to 12% alcohol. And this makes a lot of sense. We drink wine in the United States as an alcoholic beverage. In Europe, of course, it's drunk because they can't drink the water. So in order for people to drink enough wine, they need to consume enough liquids. The alcohol is a lot less in Europe. So French wine's a lot weaker, Italian wine's a lot weaker, Spanish wine's a lot weaker because that's all they drink. Fortified wines have alcohol added and have 17 to 21% alcohol. Wine coolers contain juice and have around 6% alcohol. And so that's the way it works. Distilled spirits are alcoholic beverages that go through a distillation process, concentrating substance into ethyl alcohol. These spirits are almost always stronger than beer or wine. When the process was developed in Europe, the number of alcoholics on the continent exploded because they have to drink alcohol. They didn't have anything else to drink. They couldn't drink the water. You can drink milk, I guess, but the alcohol was a lot stronger, and all of a sudden people were just drunk as skunks all over the place. When the immigrants came to the United States, so see, it's normal for them to drink alcohol. If you live in Poland, everybody drinks vodka and beer. If you live in Hungary, everybody drinks Palinka and beer. If you live in Italy, you drink wine. If you live in France, you drink wine. So when the French came over here, or when the Germans came over here, they weren't used to drinking anything but alcoholic beverages because there is no clean water in Europe. They've got to cook it in order to make it clean. And of course that takes a lot of energy. And
If you live in Ireland, you just drink.
you just drink, yeah. And England's the same way. And they drink, their drinks aren't even cooled, they're at room temperature. So if you order a beer in England, it's at room temperature. If it's a hot day, it's like 70 degrees. You got a beer that's 70 degrees. As strange as that is. When the immigrants came to the United States, they weren't used to drinking anything but alcohol. So when they came to the United States, they started drinking again, and they of course needed to. Here they are growing corn down in the Caribbean. They're growing sugar, and of course it's difficult to transport sugar or corn because it's so bulky. So what they did, they created rum and corn whiskey in order to transport it. It's a lot easier to transport the corn as whiskey than it was as corn on the cob. Alcoholism has been very high in the United States since colonial days, and it's mostly because of the hard liquor that everybody was drinking. Of course, we weren't drinking beer. That takes too long. Distilled spirits are a lot easier to make. In a couple of days, you can make yourself a gallon of whiskey out of 5 or 6 bushels of corn. So it's a lot easier to transport things as alcohol than it was to transport it as grain. Europeans tend to drink much more alcohol than the people in the United States. Americans drank 95 liters of beer per capita and 20 liters of wine last year. Germans drink 131 liters of beer per capita and 22 liters of wine. Brits drink 103 liters of beer per capita and 13 liters of wine. The French drink 40 liters of beer per capita and 60 liters of wine. As you can see, the French and the Italians drink 59 liters of wine and 103 liters of beer. So you can see that the French and the Italians are drinking a lot of wine. 60 liters of wine per year.
Damn, but for beer, Germans got it, man. Jeez.
Oh yeah, Germans are 131 liters of beer. They call German beer the bread of Germany because they don't eat bread. They drink beer as their supplement, as their starch. The Germans do. I know. Alcohol is absorbed along the gastrointestinal tract. It's absorbed in your stomach if you're a male, in your small intestine, in your colon. In men, 10 to 20% of the alcohol is absorbed by the stomach, whereas women absorb no alcohol in their stomachs. And the reason is because they don't have alcohol dehydrogenase like men do. For the longest time, men drank a lot more alcohol than women did, and for that reason, human males evolved with more alcohol dehydrogenase in their stomach than women did. So women don't process any alcohol in their stomach.
You know, there's me and my wife both seen, there's a person in Shinli, I don't think she's pregnant.
Oh.
You know, her stomach is just
Yeah.
huge. And my wife asked her, what do you do? She goes, oh, I don't know. So,
Yeah.
I seriously don't think she's pregnant.
It's her gut, yeah. See,
But she's like this big.
yeah, with a great big gut.
Yeah, and
She
she
drinks
drinks
too
like
much.
she's pregnant.
Yeah, she just drinks too
And
much.
it's not like, you know how like pregnant is like soft? It's hard.
Yeah,
It looks like she has a
sure. Yeah,
How does that happen?
it's your liver. Your liver, as it cirrhoses, as it dies, it turns hard. It's replaced with fat, and the fat is hard, and you can palpate it. I mean, if you feel my liver right now, it's pretty soft, because I don't drink. But if I were an alcoholic, this thing would be all the way down into my gut, and it would be hard as a rock. We had an alcoholic come in one time. The doctor said, "Hey, come over here and feel and palpate his liver." And so your liver's right here. Everybody's got one. And this guy, his liver, it's right under your rib cage. So, you know, somebody lays down on the table, then you can palpate their liver. But this guy, you could palpate, his liver was down on his pelvis. It had distended so much. And it was hard as a brick, just as hard as a brick. Of course, he died, you know, in a couple months, but yeah, it just fills up your gut. Yeah, isn't that ugly? Excuse me. In men, 10 to 20% of the alcohol is absorbed by the stomach, whereas women absorb no alcohol. Most of the men's alcohol and almost all of the women's alcohol is absorbed through capillaries in the walls of the small intestine. I don't know if this is good news or bad news. It's bad news for women. It's not such bad news for men, I guess. Because of the different processing of alcohol for males and females, a woman who consumes the same amount of alcohol and weighs the same amount as men will still maintain 30% alcohol in their bloodstream. As weird as that is. Whoops. Women have a greater problem than men because women have a lower percentage of body water to dilute the alcohol. Women have less alcohol dehydrogenase in their stomachs to break down alcohol. Women's hormonal fluctuations can make them more or less susceptible to alcohol's effects. And of course, the more hormones they have flashing through their body, the slower it is for them to process alcohol. So when they are ovulating, they get drunk real fast and real hard. So the worst time for a woman to be drinking is when she's ovulating. So she's ovulating, she's more attracted to males at this time, and she also has a high hormone level, which means that she's not processing alcohol as readily as she normally would. So the probability of her getting drunk and getting impregnated while she's ovulating is really high, as strange as that may seem. Of course, she wants to drink more when she's ovulating, as weird as that is. So this is one of the reasons, yeah, I know.
This
It's- What a racket. Women's hormonal fluctuations can make them more or less susceptible to alcohol's effects. Women absorb more alcohol during their premenstrual period than at any other time during their cycle. And this is right there when they're going to be ovulating, premenstrual. Alcohol does greater damage to women than men. Female alcoholics have death rates 50 to 100% higher than male alcoholics. We process alcohol much more readily than females do, and since we are able to get that toxin out of our bodies, it's a little bit less destructive for males than it is for females. A female alcoholic dies very readily. I had a friend who was from Hawaii, and his mother and his father were alcoholics. And they used to sit down and drink their martinis. This is in Hawaii, of course. It's where it's hot, so you process alcohol a little bit differently in the hot environments. They drank, and they would match drinks with each other. And of course, she died a lot earlier than the father did. As weird as that is, he was a World War II vet, and he was a pilot during World War II, and he died of alcoholism, but she died of alcoholism in her 40s, and he died in his 50s. The father did. And guess what the son did? He was an alcoholic too. What a shock. He was in the first SEAL team. He was a underwater, a UDT. He was, they started out as UDTs, as underwater demolition, people, and then they created the SEALs, and he was in the very first SEAL team. So the guy was like 6'4", just way too big for normal military function. He's just too tall.
Yeah, he's trying to get shot in the head.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. So eventually he got out of the SEALs and became a fighter pilot. Joined the Air Force and became a fighter pilot. He was okay as long as they were flying F-4s, but then when they went to the F-15, F-16, the cockpit was a lot smaller, and he didn't fit. Yeah, exactly. It was really tight, but the biggest problem was he was so tall, he had a long torso, short legs and a long torso. His head stuck up above the seat. Well, in a fighter plane, when you have to punch out, the top of your seat breaks the canopy.
His head would hit first.
And it was his head, exactly. So if he ever had to punch out, he would have used his head to punch a hole in the canopy.
Well, I mean, they wear helmets, so they'll be all right.
Would not, no, he'd be dead. The canopy's pretty damn hard. It's bulletproof. And the reason that the seat is able to punch a hole in it is because it's angled and it's sharp. It's relatively sharp, so it just breaks it, and then everything just shatters. But he would be using his head to punch out of the airplane. It would have crushed his skull. He would have been a dead man. So he wasn't able to fly F-4s. So then he went to B-52s, started flying B-52s. So he's a fighter pilot and a SEAL, this guy.
That's cool.
Well, not that cool. He was kind of a violent guy. So he kept getting in fights, and that's
Well,
okay.
you do that type of work, you can't be soft.
Yeah, but that's okay for a SEAL, but that's not okay for a fighter pilot. Getting in a fist fight all the time doesn't work out that way, so he kept getting busted. He retired from the military as an 04. He was a major.
Still.
For officers, 04, if you don't make colonel, you're in pretty bad shape.
See, but the thing about officers is the rank comes automatic. for enlisted, you have to go in front of a board and all this other stuff.
It's automatic up to major, but as soon as you get into the colonel ranks, then it's not automatic anymore. You've got to make rank and you've got to be accepted. It's actually, even majors sometimes it's difficult for them to become, to go anywhere. But then again, well, see, this has to do with retirement. This has to do with money.
Yeah.
The alcohol that is absorbed into the bloodstream is partially metabolized by the liver. The alcohol that is not metabolized by the liver moves easily through the capillary walls and can enter any organ or tissue because the molecules are really small. It is water soluble and it's also fat soluble. And this isn't good news. Well, it's good news if you want to get drunk fast, but it's bad news if you've got a fragile organ, you've got bad kidneys, or you've got a bad heart, or you've got sensitive lungs. Because alcohol will get into any of these organs and it will accelerate their degeneration process. So alcoholics, a lot of times they die of heart attacks, and the reason they die of a heart attack is because they had a fragile heart, and the alcohol got into the heart muscle and it made it age faster. Same thing happens with the liver, same thing happens with the kidneys. Same thing potentially can happen to the brain. So alcohol will destroy whatever it comes in contact with. If you're lucky, you're an individual who has all your organs are intact without any problems, and you can drink without anything dying, without losing an organ. Alcohol will readily cross a placental barrier and passes into the fetus's bloodstream. Alcohol has an affinity for brain tissue, as weird as that is. So as soon as the mother starts drinking, even that first drink that she takes goes right to the baby's brain. So it slows down the process, the developmental process of the baby's brain. And that's what FAS and FAE are all about. After imbibing, the individual will have the highest concentration of alcohol 60 to 90 minutes after the last drink. So you're done drinking, you've drunk your 18 beers, and you decide that you need to go home, and of course you had your last beer an hour ago. Well, you're the drunkest you're going to be right now, as soon as you walk outside. And that oxygen doesn't help you, or that air doesn't help you even a little bit. So all the processes with all the added oxygen to your system, it's actually going to make you drunker faster when you go outside. So 60 minutes after you have your last drink, you are the drunkest you're going to be, 60 to 90 minutes. Rate of absorption determines the degree of effects which can be influenced by weight, body fat, body chemistry, emotional state. If you're angry, you're going to get drunk faster. If you're healthy, you're going to process the alcohol a lot quicker. If you're not healthy, like an alcoholic, you're going to stay drunk for an extended length of time. The hotter the temperature, the faster you get drunk and the longer you stay drunk, as long as it's hot. Barometric pressure, if there's a storm moving in, it forces the alcohol into your system and you get drunk really fast. So as long as it's a sunny day, you're in good shape. But if you've got weather moving in, you've got a hurricane moving in, or a tornado, or a thunderstorm, now you're in a world of hurt and you need to stay away from alcohol because it'll move into your system really fast. Cold temperatures, this is one of the reasons why people from places like Alaska or Canada, in the wintertime, they'll sit in a bar and drink all night long. Well, it's cold outside, and since it's so cold, it slows down the process of the alcohol getting into your system. If they're in the tropics, if you go down to Phoenix in the summertime where it's 112 degrees, don't drink alcohol.
Beautiful weather.
Oh yeah, beautiful weather. You're going to get drunk real fast, and it's going to stay in your system for an extended length of time. Because the barometric, usually it's a nice sunny day and
What about like Georgia or Florida, where it's humid?
humid, where it moves into your system really quickly. Yeah. So, yeah. the alcohol is gonna stay with you for a while. If you're a female, of course, you're gonna get drunk pretty quick, so you need to be really careful. Well, they need to be really careful. Absorption and drunkenness can be increased by increasing the volume or rate of drinking. The faster you drink, the faster you're gonna get drunk. Drinking on an empty stomach, which is probably the dumbest thing that you can possibly do. Using high alcohol percentage drinks, in other words, using mixed drinks, especially if there is sugar or carbonated water involved with your mixed drink. It's going to get into your system real quick. The sugar, of course, is accelerating the process, as is the carbonated aspect of the beverage. So if you drink champagne, or you drink your mixed drink with tonic water or some kind of pop, rum and coke, for example, you're going to get drunk a lot faster, and you're going to have just the most god-awful hangover you can possibly imagine. Or you warm the alcohol like the Japanese do, and there's a reason why they warm their sake. It's so that you don't have to drink very much before you start feeling a little bit giddy. Japanese are kind of grouchy people, they are. So one of the things that they do is when they drink, you can do anything you want when you're after you've had alcohol. You can say anything that you want, and nobody will hold it against you. It's really kind of an odd cultural proclivity of the Japanese. So that's one of the reasons why they warm their alcohol. They warm their sake anyway, is so that they get drunk fast, and then it's all over with. So they start feeling happy. You can slow absorption or lessen the effects of alcohol by eating before or while you're drinking. The more fat that you take in, the more alcohol that you will absorb in the fat. So if you eat meat, or you drink milk, which has a lot of fat in it, or eat cheese, it will absorb the alcohol, and you won't get drunk as readily.
Why would you want to drink milk while you're drinking?
Well, you drink the milk, and then you drink your alcohol. It's kind of like a White Russian in your stomach. Oh, I was at a party one time. This is like I'm making a confession. I was at a party one time. It was a New Year's Eve party in Lubbock, Texas, and oh golly. I didn't have a date, so my friend got me a date, and she was gorgeous. She was really something. And he went with his girlfriend. As it turned out, the reason that he knew this lady was because she was actually his other girlfriend. So I was going out, so here I am sitting at a table with his girlfriend and his secret girlfriend. And the girlfriend figured it out during the night, and she's drinking White Russians. Well, White Russians, theoretically, you shouldn't get drunk from White Russians because it's vodka and milk, or it's actually cream. So she shouldn't have gotten drunk that fast, but she was mad. And since she was so mad, she got drunk real quick. And so she starts screaming and getting angry. So we left. And so they got into one car, and we got into another car, and we're driving back to Lubbock. We were at the base. Lubbock is about 15 miles from the base. So here we are, we're driving down the road, and all of a sudden their car stops, and she jumps out of the car and starts running across a cotton field. This is in January, so the cotton's all been picked. And I don't know if you've ever been around a cotton field, but the sticks are really sharp and really tall and hard. And here she is, she throws off her shoes and she starts stripping, and she's running across the field. And he stops, or of course she jumps out of the car, and he doesn't do anything about it. So I stopped right behind his car and start chasing her across the field. Of course, she's drunk, so she's running really, really fast. And it took me probably a quarter of a mile before I caught her out in the middle of this field. And by this time, she's stripped down to her underwear, and she didn't have a bra on. And so and she's just chopped her feet all to pieces. Of course, she's not feeling anything. So I picked her up and I started carrying her back. I didn't realize how heavy she was. Of course, I only weighed about 145 pounds. And so on the way back, of course, she's bleeding like a stuffed pig, and she's naked, and I'm trying to find her clothes, and they've all blown all over the place. It was just a mess. I was a hero that
Happy
night.
New Year's.
Sounds like a fun night.
Yeah, a real fun night. I got to carry a almost naked woman back to the car.
Cotton field.
I know, it's stupid. Anyway, she was drinking White Russians. Not that that's important. Anyway, all right.
What's that stuff they put in coffee? Kahlua?
Kahlua? Yeah, it's
I
that
think
coffee.
it's
Yeah,
What
Kahlua.
is it?
It's a liquor. It's just a liqueur.
like Bailey's.
Coffee flavored liqueur.
Is it like Bailey's?
I don't know anything about Bailey's. I just,
Irish,
yeah, I don't know.
Irish.
Okay, here's the kicker.
And it's already like mixed, the
Mhm.
coffee, the like
It's
alcohol
supposed to
in.
be like for your coffee. It's like a cream, it's a little thick, but there's like, I think like 0.2 alcohol, maybe a little bit more.
The kicker was that his other girlfriend was only 18 years old. That was the kicker, and she was already pregnant. So here I am dating a woman who's 18 years old. I've got 2 kids, and I don't know, it's 25 or 26. But here she is, she's 18 and knocked up, and
For your friend.
well, she was his girlfriend. I didn't touch her. I didn't touch the lady. But,
If she acted like that, I wouldn't want to touch her.
Jiminy Christmas, what a mess. What a mess of a night. And of course, the whole time that I'm chasing this lady, he's in my car making out with the 18-year-old. Yeah. And, yeah, it's all right, I don't care.
It's normal.
Yeah, it's normal. As things turned out, everything worked out in the end. The girlfriend broke up with him. The pregnant lady admitted that it was her neighbor that impregnated her. So, and of course, you know, I'm completely clueless and stupid as the
So
dumbest
the
person.
one that ran was the pregnant one?
No, the one that was the one that I was supposed to be going out on a date with was pregnant. She was pregnant.
For a freaking neighbor knocked her up.
Well,
She's dating this guy.
yeah, the neighbor knocked her up. The neighbor was in his 30s. I know.
But so the girl that you dated, did she know that he was dating somebody else?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so then
Yeah, everything was
getting
fine.
knocked up by her neighbors,
It's no big deal.
no big deal.
I know. She hadn't graduated from high school yet, which was a little tricky. Anyway, I was, you know, I'm in the middle of this whole maelstrom, and I have no clue what's going on, like an idiot. 2 to 10% of alcohol will be excreted before metabolism occurs. Working in the emergency room, if you've ever been, I guess they don't call you down to the emergency room.
Only if they need something,
Right.
like right away, like an EpiPen or.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't be called down for the drunks.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I used to get to go down and help with the drunks. You can smell the alcohol on their breath. You can smell the alcohol in their sweat. It's really the more alcohol, of course, they've had, the stronger the alcohol they've had. You can smell. You can tell if they've been drinking beer, or if they've been drinking wine, or if they've been drinking, peach brandy or whatever, because it's on their skin. They smell like peaches, as weird as that is. Or plums. I mean, it's just the strangest thing in the world. So they're excreting all this stuff through their pores, and you can smell it. The remaining 90 to 98% of the alcohol is metabolized through oxidation by the liver and excreted through the kidneys and the lungs. In order of oxidation, the ethyl alcohol is broken down by alcohol dehydrogenase, which creates acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde dehydrogenase breaks down the acetaldehyde, and it creates acetic acid. Acetic acid is metabolized by oxygen, and it creates carbon dioxide in the water. That's the process. Now, this can be messed up by a lot of different things. Asians don't have very much acetaldehyde dehydrogenase, and because of that, start processing the alcohol differently than people who aren't Asian. So if you've ever been drinking with an Asian individual, their cheeks get rosy red almost immediately as soon as they drink alcohol, and they're warm to the touch. It's really kind of interesting. So they have nice, cute red cheeks, and they get drunk really quick. But then again, they're not breaking down. This is a poison. Acetaldehyde has a chemical structure very similar to formaldehyde, and that's what we preserve tissue in, formaldehyde. So of course it's very toxic. So for the Japanese or for the Chinese, I've never been around Chinese people when they drink, but I've been around Japanese people. They get drunk really fast. And of course, if they're not careful, they can, this toxicity can cause a lot of problems for them. And they will die of liver cancer or stomach cancer very readily. It has been speculated that American Indians may have a high alcoholism rate and advanced cirrhosis because of disruptions of the acetaldehyde dehydrogenase, just like Asians, and alcohol dehydrogenase systems. This, along with the binge pattern of drinking, increases the likelihood of an unfortunate outcome for drinking with American Indians. And this may be one of the reasons why American Indians react to alcohol in such a negative manner, where they die of alcoholism at a relatively young age in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, whereas Europeans can drink a lot for an extended length of time, and they won't die of alcoholism until they are in their 60s, 70s, or 80s.
And that, do you think a lot of that has to do with the introduction of alcohol from the European contact?
Well, yeah, you guys are,
Because like I don't
you guys
think
are
we've
amateurs.
ever had,
oh, yeah,
yeah.
amateurs.
It's kind of like, yeah. And it's like the same with like diabetes, but all the,
Diabetes is probably a different process, but yeah, it has something to do with the fact that,
well, yeah, I mean, it is a
We-
different
we cha-
process, but
yeah, we changed your diet.
Diet,
Yeah, we
yeah.
forced you to change your diet. And
What
that's-
sucks is like, you go to grocery stores, what's the first thing you see? The fucking Hostess thing right in the front.
Yeah, Little Debbie's, you bet, Little Debbie's big time.
Shitty, man.
I know, and it's not even good food. It just tastes funny.
They just found out they got a Twinkie cereal.
Twinkies.
Twinkies and a honey bun freaking cereal. I was like, damn, man. Turns out that looks, fuck that.
Twinkies.
That's,
That's just sad, man.
Individuals may use home remedies to keep from getting drunk. I used to date a nurse once upon a long time ago. In between my first and second wife, I dated a nurse, and she was big on aspirin. She used to take aspirin as a prophylactic to keep from getting a hangover. Well, this kind of works, almost does. But aspirin, you got to remember, aspirin thins your blood. People that have had a heart attack, they take a baby aspirin every day, and that thins their blood enough so that they won't have another heart attack. Well, this lady is, whenever she goes out to drink, which is 3 or 4 times a week, she's taking mega doses of aspirin in order to keep from getting hangovers. And it works to some extent. She's not having hangovers. The problem is she's thinning her blood.
yeah.
And now all of a sudden,
She can't get up.
well, she can't, well, for one thing, she can't donate blood because her blood's too thin. The other thing is that her period starts to get prolonged more and more and more because she's bleeding more, of course. And her periods are longer than the time in between her premenstrual period. So she's having periods that are lasting for a week, and then all of a sudden they're 10 days, and then all of a sudden they're 2 weeks long. And of course she is really confused because some doctor has told her that she can use aspirin as a prophylactic without thinking that, of course, it's going to prolong her periods. Now, if it's a man, you don't have to worry about periods. Men don't bleed very often. Of course, if they cut themselves and they bleed like a stuck pig. But here, he wasn't really thinking about what would happen to her because she's female.
Yeah.
He was just thinking, yeah, it's tough guys. We can just take take aspirin before we go out, and our hangover isn't so bad, so that we're functional the next day. That was the idea. They needed to be functional the next day. Well, she's functional, except she's having these prolonged periods. And she can't donate blood because her blood is so thin. Now, this is during the Vietnam War, and of course, that was one of the things that they did during the Vietnam War was if you were a medic, then you donated blood, you know, to the cause. And of course, she couldn't do that because her blood was too thin. And she had type A negative, I think. And so they needed her blood, but she couldn't donate because she was bleeding herself to
I've
death.
never taken aspirin, but you know what I would do? For every like 3 beers, I would drink a glass of water or a bottle of water.
Okay, well, you're increasing the water content of your body, and
Yeah.
that dilutes out the beer.
And
the
I
alcohol.
think I got hangover when I was like maybe 16,
Okay,
but I've never had one before.
it's amazing. It must be your Puerto Rican side,
Where's the Irish?
or your Irish side.
Yeah, Irish people could drink.
They're really good at it. Aspirin inhibits the metabolism of alcohol, and when used as a prophylactic to lessen the possibility of a hangover, it actually causes the individual to become drunk faster. And of course, the drunk part was not the important part. It was the hangover. Could she be functional the next day? And she got drunk really fast. The reality is the blood is she wasn't that, I called her my girlfriend. I shouldn't have said that. We weren't really dating. We were just friends.
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 No benefits, okay?
Quote, unquote.
The reality, I wish she was my girlfriend, that would have been nice. The reality is the blood is metabolized by the body at a fairly steady rate, about 1 ounce every 3 hours. That's about 1.5 drinks, so you can get rid of a one drink, 1.5 beers in about an hour, so you're okay. As long as you're going kind of slow, then you're not going to get that drunk. It takes about 20 minutes before the alcohol is passed into the intestines and has started to affect the brain. So if we're talking about time, you don't even start metabolizing the alcohol until it's been in your system for about 20 minutes. Remember, 60 minutes to 90 minutes after you start drinking is when you're the drunkest. So, you know, if you're at the bar and you're drinking your beer or you're drinking whatever you're drinking, it's going to take at least 20 minutes before it starts affecting you, and then you're going to be the drunkest at 60 minutes after you had that drink. In most states, a blood alcohol level, and of course, this is kind of important, DUIs are really kind of important. In most states, it's 0.08. In Utah, it's 0.04. That's legal intoxication. For truck drivers, it is half that level, and for pilots, it's 1/4.
Jeez, you can't even have.
I don't want my
half a
pilots
beer.
with any alcohol in their system, but hey, that's me, I guess. England's limit is the same as Utah, 0.04. Norway's legal limit is 0.10, so it's a lot higher. Now that may seem funny to you, but if you are ever caught drinking and driving in Norway, you lose your license forever. It's the death sentence as far as you and driving is concerned.
Damn.
So if you ever get any DUI, they take away your license and you cannot drive in Norway. The rest of Europe is 0.25, 0.025. Australia's limit is 0.05. What they're trying to do is keep people from drinking and driving, which makes a lot of sense. You should call a taxi if you're drunk and you've been drinking. And that's the way it works. Where you have a lot of public transportation in most of Europe, who drives in Europe? You don't have to. Norway's the same way. Lots of public transportation. England, it's the same way. So they don't have to worry about it. But if you live in Montana where the bar is 50 miles away from your house, you don't really have much choice. How in the hell are you going to get home? And there are no taxis because, well, that's Montana.
Just go slow.
So you
Do the one-eyed thing if you have to. I've done that.
the one-eyed thing. Yeah, that really helps your depth perception.
It does.
Closing one eye, no, it doesn't.
Well,
You can't see
It
it.
works for me, I've gone home.
Well, yeah, you got home, but you had one eye that was working and one eye that wasn't. When you opened both eyes, your eyes actually went crossed. Small amounts of ethyl alcohol or even infrequent bouts of intoxication have little, if any, negative effects. So being a social drinker is not that bad. It doesn't really hurt you. No level of alcohol use is safe for someone who is pregnant. It goes right to the baby's brain. Any mental or physical problems that an individual has can be aggravated by alcohol. Some are allergic to alcohol, and some people are allergic to the congeners that they use to flavor the alcohol. Some have a high genetic or environmental susceptibility to addiction, like my great-great-nephew, who was strung out on heroin at birth. Now he is susceptible to anything. He is an addict. And as long as he's does everything in moderation, he's going to be okay for the rest of his life. But if he ever starts drinking or ever starts smoking pot or smoking cigarettes, he's going to become addicted to whatever it is that he uses. Some have a history. I'm sorry?
Is that a guarantee?
That's a guarantee. It's already been programmed into his brain. That's what heroin addiction does to you.
And that was from your
He's just got to stay away from everything for the rest of his life. Some have a history of abuse and addiction. Alcohol increases the probability of breast cancer. I mean, I've been able to do it. I've stayed away from everything. I'm not addicted to anything that I'm aware of. Maybe Mountain Dew. Maybe.
That's a real addiction.
Well, not really. I can take it or leave it. It's sugar, okay? And it's not the caffeine that I'm addicted to, it's the sugar. Therapeutic uses of ethyl alcohol can be used as a solvent in medications because it is fat and water soluble. Any of the liquids that you dispense are probably suspended in alcohol, tincture of whatever. It can be used as a topical disinfectant. It's a body rub to reduce your fever, a pain reliever for nerve-related pain. It can be used to halt premature labor, strangely enough. So if somebody goes into labor and they're way far away from the hospital, if you give them a shot of whiskey, it will slow their labor down to the point of stopping it. Of course, in the hospital, we don't use, shots of whiskey. We use magnesium sulfate, and that stops labor almost immediately. Yeah, magnesium sulfate. Why do people drink? They think it tastes good. To quench their thirst because they're so thirsty. This is illogical because alcohol, of course, evaporates very rapidly and it makes you even thirstier. It's like drinking salt.
Yeah.
Relaxes muscle tension to warm yourself up, and it actually works to warm you up if you take a shot of something. It dilates your blood vessels and it allows more blood into your extremities. A good example of this is if somebody's a really good drinker, you'll see that the blood vessels in their nose are broken. And the reason is because when you drink, especially to excess, the blood vessels in your nose will dilate, and of course sometimes they pop. So the more you drink, the more redder your nose gets, as much fun as that is. Red wines are full of antioxidants and work as an anti-inflammatory on the circulatory system. So red wines are good for you. If you drink in moderation, you're okay. And it's actually good for you. 1 to 2 drinks per day reduces the incidence of heart disease and plaque buildup, so it's good for you. It has an anti-inflammatory effect. It increases your good cholesterol, your HDL. It changes the interaction of the lipoproteins, the HDL and the LDL. So it's good for you. It will keep you from having blood clots or blockages in your circulatory system. It decreases tension, of course. I mean, that's what it's for. These effects are even true in most serious alcoholics. So that first drink they take during the day, it actually will help them. Unfortunately, they just keep drinking, and now they got a problem. These people die from enlarged hearts, cirrhotic liver, and damaged brains, but at least they are a little bit healthy. Health benefits of alcohol. In viable women, drinking increases the effects of estrogen on bone loss, giving them higher bone mass so they don't get osteoporosis. 1 to 2 drinks per day lowers the risk of stroke. Heavy drinking actually increases the possibility of stroke, but if you limit yourself to 1 to 2 shots of whiskey a day, it actually will reduce stroke. When I was in college, I had a track coach who had had a heart attack, and his doctor prescribed whiskey in the morning and whiskey in the evening. And he was a Quaker, and they don't drink. He was a Quaker, but this was for medicinal purposes. So he would come to work after having 2 shots of whiskey in the morning. And when he went home at night, he would take 2 more shots. He had a really fragile heart, and he was able to stay alive for about 5 years after his heart attack. And they predicted that, of course, he'd have a stroke and die. But he was able to coach us for about 5 years. Well, I had him for 4 years. And he coached, and our team was the last team he coached. And he died about a year after I left college. Which is kind of interesting because I had to take comps in order to graduate from college. And there were 3 people that that gave me my comps. One died in an automobile accident about 6 months after I graduated. My coach was one of the guys, and he died a year after I graduated. And the other guy died of a heart attack like 2 weeks after I graduated. So all the people that had anything to do with my comps were dead within a year. I don't know if that means. Yeah, I'm a little spooky. Yeah, there's something going on with me.
I have to try it again.
Yeah, now I have to go back. It can add to relaxation and decrease the time it takes to go to sleep. Alcohol reduces REM sleep and decreases dreaming, making the individual feel less rested the next day. And of course, this is what was happening after Vietnam. A lot of guys were going back. They hadn't used heavy drugs when they were overseas. When they came back, they started drinking because they were having bad dreams. And of course, this is what happened to them. Chronic drinking of alcohol increases the risk of sleep apnea. You go to sleep in really strange positions, and this can be really serious. You're cutting off your airway, and potentially you're choking yourself, not to the point of dying, but to the point of waking yourself up so you don't get very good sleep. Alcoholics can get into the oddest, or people that are drunk can get into the really strange positions to sleep. Sometimes they'll pass out and their head will just fall, and it's all, they're strangling themselves to death. But they're drunk, so they can't, it doesn't wake them up. We used to find them in the weirdest positions, almost to the point where they weren't breathing at all. But of course they were drunk, so they didn't move. Not everybody has the same psychological effects with alcohol. It can depend on the environment where it's used. If you use it in a bar, that's kind of a happy place, or maybe at a party. That's another happy place. But if you're drinking all by yourself, curled up in your chair at home, this is not a good environment to get drunk in. Solitary drinkers. The mood of the individual prior to drinking, were you mad, were you sad, why are you drinking? The general psychological makeup of the user, are you normally a happy person, are you normally a sad person? A lot of times alcohol will reverse the process of whatever your personality is. So when I have had alcohol in my life, when I drink, I haven't had a drink since 1976, but when I drank, it made me, I was the kind of person that would cry into their beer. I got really unhappy. So see, drinking doesn't make any sense at all. Why in the world would they even start drinking? So my psychological makeup is normally really pretty high, pretty happy. So when I drank, I got depressed. Well, that didn't make any sense to me. Why in the world would I drink?
I was opposite. I drink to forget.
You drink to forget. Okay, and it works for you. See, it didn't work for me, because when I drank, I would sit there and I would think about
You would
things.
dwell on stuff, huh?
I would ruminate, exactly, I would dwell on things, which didn't make any sense at all. I was in the service when my wife left, and I started, and people told me, well, you need to drink away your problems, and then they will go away. I mean, this is what military people do. I know, it was
Came
dumb.
back full force.
Oh, it was worse. It was just terrible. And not only that, but I had hangovers. I had really bad hangovers. I got grouchy when I drank. Not to the point of becoming violent, but to the point of becoming depressed, almost suicidal. I mean, it was that bad. So I was thinking, why the hell would I ever do this? This is the dumbest thing in the world. It's like having the flu. You get depressed, so I just stopped. It didn't make any sense at all. And I had 2 kids to take care of. So you can't function and take care of somebody at the same, and be drunk at the same time. It tends to lower your inhibitions, and that's why a lot of people drink. It's an excuse. Oh, geez, you know, that, I grabbed your body part, but the reason I did that was because I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing. Great excuse for being able to fondle somebody that you shouldn't have touched. Increase self-confidence, promotes sociability, it calms you, it relaxes you, it sedates you, it reduces your tension. And of course, that was the idea. I was supposed to be getting over all of this stuff because my wife had run off with my best friend, which is never a good situation. For someone lonely, depressed, angry, or suicidal, alcohol acts as a depressant. It deepens negative emotions with disinhibiting effects. You become verbally aggressive, you become physically aggressive, you can potentially become violent. And of course, if it's all aimed inside, then potentially you will commit suicide. Even low to moderate doses can impair judgment when driving and result in vehicular crashes. It leads to high-risk sexual activity because people tend to be a little bit hornier when they have been drinking. They don't play out the scenario in their brain. They don't think about what's going to happen next. Neurotransmitters affected by alcohol. Initially, it causes a release of serotonin, raising your mood, so it does make you feel good. Excess use depletes serotonin, causing depression, and this isn't good. So some people, of course, they drink so that they feel better. Yeah, but remember, the brain is always trying to protect itself. So you're increasing your serotonin level in your brain, and so what is your brain doing? It's down-regulating the number of serotonin receptor sites. So now when you're not drunk, and you don't have that surge of serotonin from the alcohol, now you're more depressed than you were before, because you have down-regulated your serotonin receptor sites.
Well, plus I was like mixing, like when they had me on like Zoloft and stuff.
Oh, there
I
you
didn't
go.
give a shit, I would drink anyway.
You're on the
So I
Zoloft.
was just and all over.
You're just bouncing all over the place. Okay.
And that didn't work, so they put me on Prozac, that didn't freaking work. And then plus I stepped in with my migraines. That helped in the morning though. If I was drinking, that probably I was good.
I'm sorry, they messed you up.
You know, I have my thing on a disc. I'm gonna show you all the medications they have.
That's
Like
not,
2 pages worth of medicines.
that's just not right. Just to keep you in the functional in the military, to keep you a killing machine. That's just not right. Okay, so now we've got a depressed person. So when they're not drinking, they're more depressed than they were before. So what do? Well, in the morning, when you get up in the morning and you're hungover, what do? You have to have a hair of the dog. You have to drink alcohol in order to increase your serotonin level, and that's the only way you can feel normal. So now we've got this cycle going on.
Yeah, it'd be like that after like, I'd have to drink like 3 beers and I was good the rest of the day.
Exactly, you feel,
You gotta keep it going.
Exactly.
Otherwise,
yeah. And if you don't drink your 3 beers in the morning, then now you're
you
depressed.
just wanna go to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. Dopamine is released, giving surges of pleasure. The D1, D2, D3 sites in the mesolimbic reward pathway. It causes a release of norepinephrine, resulting in positive mood and raised self-esteem. Medenkephalin is released, reducing pain, and that's one of the reasons why alcoholics feel no pain. Glutamate release is pleasurable, reinforcing drinking. Endorphins and anandamides are released, reinforcing the drinking. NMDA receptors are inhibited, impairing memory, so now you don't have to remember all the stupid things you said and did while you were drunk. You can't, because all that part of your brain isn't taking in long-term memory. So you can't remember the lampshade you put on your head and danced around like you actually could dance.
I would black out sometimes. I'd wake up and I'd have.
We're gonna talk about
blood
blackouts.
on my shirt.
Yeah, oh jeez.
I didn't know what the hell happened.
Yeah. GABAs release, lowering inhibitions and slowing the brain. Alcohol and sex, at low doses, increases your desire for both males and females. So a couple beers and the two individuals are jumping into bed and having a frolic, as it were. Let's just call it a frolic.
I never did
It can intensify your orgasms if you're a female, and for that reason, a lot of females like to drink and have sex. It decreases erectile function and delays ejaculation in males, so males have a prolonged erection and they can have sex for a little bit longer than they would normally. Alcohol has long been mythologized as a sexual lubricant, though its effects should not always lead to this reality. Unfortunately, among adolescents, this is really kind of a tragedy, because they did studies, and what they discovered was if a girl is drunk, then 39% of males think that it's okay to force sex on her. If a female is drunk, 18% of females think it's okay for somebody to force sex on her. So that's a lot of people. That's 40% of the male population thinks it's okay to rape a drunk woman, and 18% of females feel exactly the same way. This is really tragic. In the military now, hasn't always been this way, but in the military now, if somebody is drunk, if a female is drunk, you cannot have sex with them.
They'll freaking court-martial.
Yeah, they will, because
And it won't be life sentence either.
No. Yeah. You cannot have sex with somebody who's been drinking.
See, I was really that guy that was into that. I'd be all, fuck it, man, it's kind of going to plane, let's go skydiving and go jump out of a plane. But I mean, to do what we did, you had to be a little bit of adrenaline junkie.
Yeah, just a bit.
We just go get tattoos downtown.
Remember I told you about the nurse that I wasn't dating, but I wanted her to be my girlfriend. She confessed to me one day that the first day she was on base, she went to the officers club. Of course, she was a second lieutenant. She went to the officers club, she got drunk, and the base commander followed her out to her car and raped her. Now the question is, of course, and I'm thinking, well, you should have done something about it. But the reality
It's gotta be up in the stars.
this is back in the 70s, and the probability of her being able to charge him with rape was impossible. For one thing, he's a base commander, so he's a full bird colonel. He would have said it was consensual. She would have said it's not. And of course, who would have won? Well, he would have won, of course, because of his higher rank and whatnot. So, this is not uncommon, and it was real common for military personnel back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s to get women drunk and then have, mass sex with them. When my wife was stationed over in Korea, they had a nurse, and the pilots would do this. They'd set girls up, and of course, there's like 3 or 4 of them, and they would ply this lady with drinks, get her completely sloshed. Somebody would take her back to their room. They would start having sex with, and then they'd film it. And this happened a couple times to a couple nurses at the hospital. And it got real ugly. This is in Korea. When was she in Korea? 1993. And see, they hadn't changed the rules at that point. So you could have sex with with a drunken female. Now you can't have sex with her if she's been drinking at all, because she can't give you consent. There is no consensual sex if somebody's been drinking. High blood alcohol levels can cause intoxication, but experienced drinkers can mask the effects of alcohol for a brief period of time. Binge drinking is consuming 5 or more drinks in one setting for males and 4 or more drinks in one sitting for females. Remember, females, alcohol is not processed in the female stomach like it is in the male stomach. 44% of college students admit to being binge drinkers. Not here, of course, but on other college campuses. ASU, for example, has always been known as a party school. Colorado State, big-time party school. And there are schools where people go to drink beer, as weird as that sounds. 21% of college students admit to binging frequently. We had this problem when I went to college in 1967. In our freshman class, there were a number of guys that would drink beer all the time. I mean, it was like they were drunk constantly. All those guys were gone after the first semester. They couldn't handle it. I mean, it was a really difficult school, and you just couldn't do that. And so most of those guys were drunk or were gone after the first semester. Binge drinkers between 21 and 25 average 18 binges a year. Binge drinkers between 18 and 20 average 15 binges a year. Now the reality is that 18 and 20, there's no place where they can drink legally. So this is all illegal drinking that they're doing. But they're still binging 15 times a
You go to
year.
Mexico,
What, high school?
you can go to Mexico. It says 18 to 20.
Yeah,
Drinking-
okay.
If you live in San Diego, you're going to Mexico.
Oh, yeah, what if you live in Montana or Colorado
Or
or
Canada.
Nebraska?
What's the drinking age in Canada?
18.
Well, there you go. Closer, the
Uh,
wheelers away.
Well, that may be true, but not if you live in the middle of the country.
Oh, then.
What are you gonna do?
You gotta go steal grandpa stuff.
What if you live in San Francisco? Yeah, that's pretty far away to go to either.
You better go to Japantown.
It's still 21 in
People
China.
don't care, man. Or Monterey. You can go to Monterey.
Monterey, California,
Yep.
the legal drinking
Yeah,
age
it's
is
not legal, but
it's 21. I know it's
It's
not
not
legal,
legal,
that's the
yeah,
whole
okay.
point. These people are drinking illegally, and nobody's doing anything about it. And this is one of the reasons why I think that if they legalize marijuana, how are they going to keep people from smoking marijuana if they can't keep people from drinking alcohol? For many people who drink frequently, 5 drinks will not get them drunk. Heavy drinking is consuming 5 or more drinks at a sitting at least 5 times a month. With heavy consumption, the drinkers can no longer control their mood from the alcohol. The depressant effects takes over, blood pressure is lowered, motor reflexes slow, digestion and nutrient absorption becomes inefficient, body heat escapes rapidly because of chronically dilated blood vessels, sexual performance becomes unlikely because you're pretty much passed out. So the probability if you're a male of having an erection is fairly remote. Speech slurs, muscle coordinations becomes questionable, alertness decreases. High doses of alcohol, blood alcohol test level of 0.12, legal drunk is 0.08, may cause mental confusion, mood swings, loss of judgment, emotional turbulence, slurred speech, loss of emotional control, disturbed REM sleep and dreaming, fatigue during the day, insomnia at night, bedwetting, apnea in the form of snoring, which is one of the more irritating things, if you can imagine, is the bedwetting. So somebody's drunk, they come home, they lay down in bed, and they forget to get up to go and urinate. A lot of times they think that they're in front of a urinal or in front of the toilet, and they just wet the bed, as weird as that is. This is one of the biggest complaints of individuals who have to take care of somebody who's a drunk. is the fact that a lot of times they wet the bed. And unless you've got rubber sheets or whatever, if you've got a rubber pad on, they just soak the thing because they've been drinking a lot of liquid. And so they have a lot of that stuff coming out of them, as pretty and as ugly as it is. Why don't we stop right here? We'll pick this up next time.